Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hello, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for sharing the podcast. There's a very important documentary that's out. I just found out about this recently. It's called Vaxxed 3. So VAXXED 3, Authorized to Kill. And this is put out by Children's Health Defense, childrenshealthdefense.org. Can't say a whole lot more about it because we'll get deleted. We'll get censored. But anyway, it's very important. And one of the reasons I bring that up is some dear friends are a part of that. They're in that documentary, Scott and Cindy Shera, and so many others with heartbreaking stories. But there was also a documentary that came out just over a year ago called Breaking the Oath. And we're blessed to have the producer back in studio with us, Jeff Wagner, redbloodedpatriots.com. Good to see you again, brother. Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Love being here.
The Patriot Review podcast. How's that going?
It's going well. It's going well. I've got a lot of great guests that come on, and it's important to speak out and really to face what reality is in the United States today, and that's what we aim to do.
So what outlets are you on? Are you on Rumble, and where can people listen?
Your typical streaming channels, other than YouTube, because of course YouTube will not allow me to be on there anymore after I talked about this very issue. Wow. Of course, and so I got kicked off there pretty quickly. But so Rumble, blessednews.tv, Frank Speech, Mike Lindell's Operation, and your typical streaming channels at Welcome Conservatives. So,
and let's start with censorship. Let's start with communist policy in America. That's what's happening.
That's right.
It's hard to hear those words because 10, 20 years ago, most people go, what? Communism in America? Communist policy? But what's happening when they censor one side, one worldview, one debate or one group of people and put out their talking points? They've got the megaphone of the media, they've got Hollywood, they've got the corporations, they've got nonprofits, they've got the NGOs and all this stuff. So and that's propaganda. They're putting out some stuff, whether it's true or not, but a lot of it's false, a lot of it's misinformation. And what do they accuse everybody else of doing? Misinformation, disinformation.
They do.
So let's start with this, Jeff. I know you've been censored, I've been censored, shadow banned. And Tim Walz has said something very disturbing about free speech. Kamala Harris, we know what she believes. She's perfectly willing to censor Americans, Christians, pro-lifers. We know what the Biden administration has done to arrest pro-lifers and censor people. Hillary Clinton recently said in an interview, Americans who parrot Russian propaganda should be criminally charged. The question, of course, is who determines what is propaganda? Who determines what is disinformation or misinformation? Go ahead, Jeff Wagner.
Exactly. And it's the leaders of the gulag. That's who determines what propaganda is, supposedly. And furthermore, when Hillary Clinton says that, it is absolutely vomit-inducing because she's the person who paid for the Steele dossier, which was a pack of lies, and which the media lapdogs of the Democrat National Party and the rhinos as well, the deep state, we might as well say, they use that and they parrot that. So I guess what she's really saying, anybody who disagrees with the propaganda that I paid for and tells the truth should go to jail. So that sounds more like one of her heroes, which was Mao.
Let's talk about that, because what you just said, is there proof that she actually put that out? Because weren't they accusing President Trump of colluding with Russia? Is there proof, and where can people find out about this? Because the media won't report anything like that.
There is proof. There's the money trail that's been followed back to her and the DNC. And I guess where to go would be to go to some of our counterparts who did, extensive investigations into it, and simply going to a Rumble or something and pulling up some of those shows and looking at them for yourself. There's plenty of evidence out there.
Well, one of the things that's infuriating to a lot of Americans is there's no accountability.
No, there isn't.
I've said this. I said this when Barack Obama was selected and then elected in the first couple of years of his administration, some of the stuff that he was doing. And I was going, this is no one's going to hold him accountable for some of this.
Right.
And sure enough. And so I said, he's above the law, just like most every liberal Democrat or progressive or Marxist in America in government above the law. And that's what really infuriates a lot of freedom-loving Americans, even independents. Mm-hmm. Maybe some Democrats might even be upset by that, but very few. Or I don't hear about it. They don't come out and say anything about it. But isn't that a problem when there's no accountability, when people on one side seem to get off scot-free?
It's absolutely a problem. It's not the United States anymore when that happens, because there's no rule of law. There's no equal justice under the law anymore. And you can look at the J6ers, and you can look at individuals out protesting in front of abortion centers. You can look at someone who posts a meme that Hillary Clinton doesn't like, who got a 10-year sentence for that. It really is like we're living in the communism of the 1940s and 50s, right? I mean, it's just a nightmare to see what's going on in our own country, and people really need to wake up and figure out for themselves what reality is, and furthermore need to speak out about it
before we run out of time.
Yes.
And there's a big election in November, friends, and elections have consequences. And Kamala Harris' running mate, Tim Walz, the radical governor from Minnesota, said there's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech. And stop right there. Again, who determines what hate speech is? We know that the left has already determined, or the Democrats, they've determined that if the biblical worldview is hate speech, if you call homosexuality a sin, for example.
Right.
And so they're determining what's hate speech, misinformation, disinformation. Another comment before we move on?
Sure. Tim Walz is a beta male and is an absolute joke. He and his counterpart, Gavin Newsom, out in California, who also just said that people who show a specific video that tells the truth, that should be a criminal action to do so. So this is Orwellian, what is happening around us. Mm-hmm. And I'm really concerned about it for one reason, and that is because we no longer have the faith-based underpinnings that we had when we faced all these other challenges. People like to say, well, we've been through hard times before. Sure we have. We've been through terrible times before. But we had a foundation, and that foundation, in my opinion, is largely damaged by what's going on.
Yep. And we also had, I wouldn't even say a fair, honest media, but we at least had more true journalists. Now you have to put journalists in air quotes for most, quote, journalists.
That's right.
Let's mention before we move on, breaking the oath. Anything recent that you heard about that? I mean, people still can go watch it. They can download it. Mm-hmm. Friends, if you're not familiar with that there it is, Breaking the Oath documentary. Go ahead and share a little bit about that.
So that is the Shara family story, and it really brings into view not only their story and the loss of their daughter Grace, but the fact that the protocols that were deliberately used and the end of treatment milestones that hospitals really sought out to achieve so they'd get paid led to the deaths of millions of people. Yep. And as you said, nobody's been held accountable for it. So, you look at an Anthony Fauci, and he's actually responsible for much worse things than, say, a Joseph Mengele, right? So, because it affects so many more people. And it's just a travesty. And yes, there still are people coming and watching the video, get a lot of comments on it on Rumble, and it's still out there, or it's on AmericaFirstProductions.com, which is what I use for the documentary productions.
Well, I appreciate people like Rand Paul, who is fighting
Amen.
To expose Fauci. I get the Substack. You can follow Rand Paul. You can follow all kinds of people that are good, that just don't have the media behind them. So let's go on now. I opened the show by talking about this is the brand new one over at Children's Health Defense. And now you mentioned when I told you about the trailer when you walked in today, you mentioned how I think you said experiments were going on people, on American citizens for years. Was it LSD you mentioned and other things?
Oh, there's all kinds of history on it, and I'm
goes way back.
I'm gonna do a show on it. I don't know when, but I was watching some documentaries, and all this stuff is established fact. All this stuff is from documents that were retrieved from the Freedom of Information Act. So, the United States twice released, and 2 cities released malaria. Containing malaria-infected mosquitoes in the state of Florida, and they use LSD for experiments to try to see if they could win a war by exposing the enemy to this LSD. And there's just experiments that have done on Americans all across the country for decades. And, this documentary that I watched started in the 1950s, but there's a long history of it.
Yeah.
And I think what we're facing now is the veil's been lifted, that people no longer just take for granted that their government is, has their best interest at heart, because we've all now seen, and everything's been exposed as to what their true motives are.
Well, I just don't think people are learning quick enough, or people are finding out. What I'm thinking is they're finding out a little too late, because, as you said, this has been going on for a long time.
Yes, and you look at people who have blown the whistle before, like Senator McCarthy, right? So he's from Wisconsin. We're from Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Every time you talk about communism, you are labeled as this crazy nut like Senator McCarthy. Well, the problem is, if you read the book Blacklisted by History, that book goes on to state factual information about how the guy was right. He was right in his accusations. He may have went about it in a very forceful way, but that's what they tend to do to anybody that's telling the truth. They lie about them. They attack what they're saying as falsehoods, and we're seeing the same playbook being used. You mentioned Barack Obama. What an opportunity he had to come in and to really make a difference as far as race relations go and everything else. But he didn't, did he?
He could have.
But he didn't, because when he said fundamentally change America, he did mean to go to a communist government.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that. We're seeing that, and then what's worse in my mind is we're seeing the Republican counterparts, the rhinos, the deep state Republicans, doing nothing about it, which is the same as supporting it.
Think about this. When he said that, I mean, the media didn't want that to get out. But he said, I think it was, if I remember right, 5 days away. He was talking to his supporters. We are 5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Right.
Change. They ran on change.
Right.
So they didn't like America. They didn't like our history, or how they interpret our history to be. They didn't like our founding. They didn't like capitalism. They didn't like a lot of things. And then Biden, he took something out of the World Economic Forum playbook, build back better.
Right.
Well, in order to build something back better, you've got to dismantle, or you got to wreck it before you can build it back. And I don't think people even thought about, I think for so long, Jeff Wagner, we've been not trained, maybe conditioned in America to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Expect the best out of our fellow human beings.
Right.
They don't really want communism. They don't really want to divide us. Go ahead.
Well, that's what's changed, right?
Yeah.
I think now everybody looks at, everybody is on, whether you're on the right or on the left, you tend to react to a state of everybody's guilty before proven innocence. And that we all have to get over, for sure. That is something that we're all guilty of. And in the case of Barack Obama and him coming in and fundamentally changing America, this is what he meant. Biden,
we're seeing it.
Biden-Harris is a continuation of it. And you could see that at the border, right? I mean, it's just no logical reason to have the border as open as it is.
And that's a good segue. When we take a little pause here, we're going to come back and talk about open borders and what some experts are predicting as far as the amount of illegal aliens and immigrants that are going to vote that aren't even citizens in November. It's Well, it's not shocking to probably you guys, but I read it and I'm going, wow, that's a high number. So we'll be right back with Jeff Wagner. The website, by the way, friends, I gave it once. Here it is again, redbloodedpatriots.com. And you can check out the Patriot Review. We'll be right back on Worldview Matters.
Today's show is brought to you by Harbinger's Daily. World news biblically understood. Stay informed at harbingersdaily.com.
Hey friends, you can download the Freedom Project app, and it's free. Did I say that? Yeah, it's free. And you can also follow us on Rumble. And if you are over on one of the audio platforms, you can leave us a 5-star review. I've been told that helps podcasts rise in the rankings. I don't know where we're at, where we're ranked. We're still a relatively new podcast, but it's going very well thanks to God and your support and prayers. So thank you guys. Back to Jeff Wagner. Experts predict up to 2.7 million votes will be cast by illegal immigrants in November. What do you think about that number?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's low. I mean, we know we've got somewhere between 15 and 20 million that have come in. I think that the demo fascists are better than that. I think they're probably going to be more.
So don't you think the open borders agenda, if you support that, don't you think that that means they want to take down America, they want to change America, they want to dismantle it so they can rebuild it, whatever they determine, they want to build it back better, right? So open borders is a part of that platform or philosophy, no?
Well, they always tip their hand, and the protests that have been going on, a lot of the chants that I've heard are such things as, you got to burn it down before you can build it up. You got to burn it down before you can build it up.
Open.
You talked about accountability, and when you look at the borders being open, these are the things that they're not accountable for. Number one, after 9/11, 3,000 people were killed. Terrible, terrible event. We fought a war for 20 years in 2 different countries, right? And we lost soldiers, we lost money, right? And we end up getting out of Afghanistan in an embarrassing debacle. And so we fight that war for 20 years. But with the open border, there are between 120 and 150,000 people dying from fentanyl poisoning. Because that border is open, no other reason. Because of the open border, Kamala Harris, the border czar, I call her Kamala Hyena because of her idiotic laugh, but they have lost 350,000 children. 350,000 children since Biden took office that are gone, that have gone into most likely the sex trade.
Now, where did you hear that, and how can people find out more about what's going on?
You can go to Real America News, and you can go and check their reports out. They do an awesome job. They're reporters. They have journalists on the border all the time. And when you want to see what's really happening at the border, they're a great source.
Okay. Say that again.
Real America News.
Real America News. Okay, that's one.
Yeah. So you can check that out. And the other thing that they're really not being held accountable for as far as the border goes really is the voting requirements and the takeover of jobs and the free health care. And so really they're attacking every part of America by leaving that border open, and they're doing it deliberately because the end goal is not to have Kamala Harris be the president. The end goal is to have a one world government where the people are controlled.
Yeah.
And they admit themselves that they want that control. Yeah. When they say you can't say that or you should go to prison, I mean, what separates them from someone like Chairman Mao or Stalin, right? I mean, that's the rhetoric of dictatorship is what that is, of fascism. And that's why I call their party the Demo-Fascist Party, because the Democrats that whole party has been taken away from America. And Robert Kennedy Jr. was a great example of that. How'd they treat him? Twice denied Secret Service protection. Now, Trump has had 2 assassination attempts on it, but you can't talk about that. They deny it. Matter of fact, the White House continues to use the language that he's a threat to democracy.
Which is astounding. I guess it is. It is astounding to me that they're not toning down the rhetoric where everybody watching and listening knows full well that if there was an assassination attempt on a Democrat, on Harris or Walz or someone else, like, they would really full force come against Republicans, the right, the media, conservatives, to tone it down, to not say anything negative, and man, they would follow through with that. But we don't hear that.
Well, not only don't you hear that, and they don't say that, but they also cover up the truth. That this last guy was a donator to Democrats 19 times.
Surprise,
right?
surprise.
I mean, yeah, and that he parrots the rhetoric that they use, and there's
Trump is a threat to democracy. So
exactly,
to speak.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
it's frustrating.
So the concern is this, and what I wanted to get across to people today is, as Americans, we are very much at risk of losing our freedoms, and there's no other time that has been this much of a threat because of what we were talking about earlier, and the fact that our faith has been shaken, and we have to decide what we're going to do about it and what each of us can contribute to doing about it. So I just encourage people, at the very, very least, you got to get out and vote. You can't be saying it's not worth it and not vote. Otherwise, you're dooming us for certain. So please go out and vote.
Everybody. And remember the local level too. I mean, we forget about that because the media wants to make it about 2 personalities, but not policies, platform, and procedures. And what happens at the local school board, what happens with the sheriff, what happens at with local representatives. We've got to remember that, friends, because those are who directly impact every one of us. And then, of course, the federal level, the president does affect us. But locally, if we don't vote, we are not caring about our neighbors, loving our neighbors, and concerned about what's really happening in our community. And I know you wanted to share something, Jeff. Wanted to give you time to do that before, because there's so many other things we can continue to talk about.
There's a ton, but this fits in really well. So this is I'm going to read this. This is I have to hat tip the Anomalous Club on X. And he's talking about the Wizard of Oz. So the Scarecrow represents that fictional character, the person, right? The person who wants to be intelligent, and he's given a certificate of birth, and that validates him. The Tin Man, he is the robotic avatar. He works tirelessly until his body literally froze up and stopped functioning. He's heartless. He's emotionless. He's a robot creature who worked himself to death because he had no heart or soul. The Cowardly Lion was a bully, but he was actually a true coward when someone stood up to him, like most bullies. He lacked true courage, and in the end, the wizard gave him an official recognition award, authority, and status. Gee, that sounds, wonder who the bully is in this scenario. Then we have the truth that the wizard absolutely has no real power. You remember in the story of The Wizard of Oz, they pulled back the curtain, right? The Wicked Witch was pushed to fear, and which pushed fear and intimidation. The Wicked Witch is the propagandist in The Wizard of Oz and the land of Oz. So she was after Toto, and she controlled the Flying Monkey Police, right? So the police enforcers, well, they are the mischievous demons, which also represents the Bar Association and going after people who tell the truth, pulling their license to practice law away from them, etc. So then you have the government, again, obsessed with gold, right? So in the field of poppies, they were not real humans, so drugs didn't affect them, and that's talking about the fact that they push it, but they knowingly push it, and you could really draw some parallels to what's going on with fentanyl and stuff. So Toto in Latin means total. Toto exposed the Wizard of Oz and had no fear, despite being very small compared to the Great Wizard, so no one noticed him. Toto pulled the curtain on the wizard and his magical scams. Curtain also means the end of an act or scene. He pulled the curtain and started barking until others paid attention, hypothetically giving everyone the red pill. So
Go Toto.
So the Wizard of Oz is funny because all those characters, some good in them, but some evil in them as well. And I was thinking about America's situation, and the one thing that really stuck with me here is there used to be a time in America where you had all these different actors, and what did those actors do in The Wizard of Oz? They still stuck together. They're different, but they still stuck together. And that is what I think is missing. We've been played, people. We've been played by our government and these propagandists. They play us for power. They play us for wealth. And
Divide and conquer.
Yeah. So you look at a silly example like The Wizard of Oz, but you have all these people with different objectives, different agendas, but they still work together to expose the truth. And that's what I think people like you and me are trying to do. We're trying to expose the truth in the face of
Pull back the curtain.
the big bad government and pulling back the curtain.
Well, what I thought when you said, Toto pulls back and then barks and barks till people pay attention and see what's behind the curtain, I just think of how Kamala Harris is totally, they just created her.
Yes,
right? She won't even do interviews because she's so shallow and maybe doesn't have whatever it takes. But it's amazing. Pay no attention to the empty suit, in this case, Kamala Harris, behind the curtain. It's really astounding that people, and she still has incredible support. So I wish we had more time, Jeff, but we're under a minute. It's amazing to me that most Democrats will still go, I'll vote for whoever has a D behind their name. And it really is, that says something about our country too. Real quick, go ahead.
Yeah, so the Democrats that are out there, your party says that Trump is a threat to democracy, yet you have put in place a candidate who didn't receive a vote. You have a candidate who has 14 million votes in Joe Biden. You have Kamala, who was appointed to be the presidential candidate in violation of the constitutional process. So I posed to you Democrats, which party is really the party that is jeopardizing our republic?
Our former republic under God. Jeff Wagner, The Patriot Review. Check out redbloodedpatriots.com. Thanks for being in studio, brother.
Pleasure.
Good to see you as always. It always goes by fast, man. Every show. But God bless you, friends. And as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.